Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope all of you are fine. In the previous lecture, we have discussed in detail about the anterolateral system, which included the anterior and the lateral spinothalamic tract. While talking about the lateral spinothalamic tract, we have discussed that it carries the sensation of pain and temperature. And in pain, we discussed the two types of pain, the fast pain and the slow pain sensation. So fast pain sensation is which is carried by the A delta fibers to the spinal cord, and then from the spinal cord in the lateral spinothalamic tract, it is carried to the brain. So those fibers which carry the signals regarding the fast pain, they constitute the neospinothalamic tract, and those fibers in the lateral spinothalamic tract which carry the sensations or the signals regarding the slow pain constitute the paleospinothalamic tract. Neo means new and paleo means old. So neospinothalamic tract are the fibers which carry the signals regarding the fast pain, and paleospinothalamic tract are the fibers which carry the signals regarding the slow pain sensation. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss the analgesia system, and we are going to discuss a few abnormalities of the pain sensation, and we are going to discuss the spinocerebellar pathways. First, we are going to talk about the analgesia system. Analgesia system in the central nervous system is a pain suppression system. It is the pain suppression system of the pain suppression system of the nervous system. Stimulation of the certain parts of the brain cause suppression of the pain sensation. These parts of the brains which suppress the pain sensation constitute the analgesia system. The sensitivity to pain, it varies in different individuals, and this difference in the sensitivity of the pain from one person to the other person, it depends upon the efficacy of the analgesia system. If the analgesia system is efficient, then sensitivity to pain is low, or threshold for pain stimulation you can say is high. And if there is low efficacy of the analgesia system, it will cause an increased sensitivity to pain. So in previous lecture we talked about the transmission of the pain signals from the periphery to the brain, and now we are going to talk about the suppression of these incoming pain signals. That suppression is caused by the analgesia system. So pain signals are transmitted from the periphery through the brain to the cortex through the lateral spinothalamic tract. Now in response to these pain signals, there is activation of certain parts of the brain. Certain components in the brain are activated, which then send signals back to the spinal cord in the dorsal horn, where they cause the inhibition of the transmission of pain signals to the central nervous system by producing the inhibition through pre and post synaptic inhibition. So we are going to discuss it in detail subsequently. So first we are going to talk about the components of the analgesia system. There are five important components of the analgesia system. The first component of the analgesia system is periventricular nuclear zone. Peri means something that surrounds. So periventricular nuclear zone means the neurons or nuclei which surround the ventricle in the hypothalamus. So periventricular nuclear zone in the hypothalamus which surrounds the third ventricle. Now what are ventricles? You might be knowing that ventricles are the cavities present within the brain. So there are two lateral ventricles, and there is a third ventricle, and then we have a fourth ventricle. These are the cavities present within the brain, and these cavities are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. These cavities are filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. So first component of the analgesia system is the periventricular nuclear zone present in the hypothalamus, and it surrounds the third ventricle. The second component of the analgesia system is the periaqueductal gray matter in the midbrain. Periaqueductal gray matter in midbrain and in upper parts of the pons. Now periaqueductal means the gray matter. Gray matter means the neurons or the cell bodies of the neurons. So neurons that surround the aqueduct. Periaqueduct means the neurons surrounding the aqueduct, where in the midbrain and in the upper parts of the pons. So periaqueductal gray matter in the midbrain and the upper parts of the pons constitute the second component of the analgesia system, and the aqueduct which they surround is the aqueduct of Salvius. Now what does aqueduct mean? Aqueduct mean a canal which is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. The third component of the analgesia system is the Raphe-Magnus nucleus. Raphe-Magnus nucleus. Now Raphe-Magnus nucleus is a midline nucleus present in the lower part of the pons and in upper part of the medulla oblongata. Present in the lower part of the pons and in upper part of the medulla oblongata. The fourth component is the nucleus reticularis paragigantocellularis. Again, I am repeating the name. It's a bit difficult, but you can memorize it if you concentrate on it. It is nucleus reticularis paragigantocellularis. This nucleus is present in the medulla oblongata. The fifth and the final component is the pain inhibitory complex. Pain inhibitory neurons present in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So these are the 5 components of the analgesia system, and these neurons are involved in causing suppression of the pain signals coming from the periphery. Now the neurotransmitters in the analgesia system and how these neurotransmitters are going to cause inhibition, we are going to see it. The fibers from the periventricular nuclear zone to the periaqueductal gray matter and to Raphe-Magnus nucleus in the pons secrete the neurotransmitter known as enkephalin. I am repeating that the neurons from the periventricular nuclear zone to periaqueductal gray matter and Raphe-Magnus nucleus, they secrete enkephalins. Neurons which are present in the periventricular zone, their fibers terminate on the periaqueductal gray matter and on the neurons in the Raphe-Magnus nucleus. Here these fibers secrete the neurotransmitter enkephalins. Now from the Raphe-Magnus nucleus to the pain inhibitory complex in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, the neurons secrete serotonin. Raphe-Magnus nucleus, it has the neurons, the fibers of which terminate onto the neurons in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. There are fibers which arise from the Raphe-Magnus nucleus, and these end up on the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Pain inhibitory complex in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord secrete the neurotransmitter serotonin. Now the neurons which are present in the pain inhibitory complex, they secrete enkephalins at their nerve endings. Now these are the neurotransmitter. This is the neurotransmitter which binds with the opiate receptors to produce analgesia or to cause the pain inhibition. So enkephalin, it binds with the receptors present on the incoming pain fibers into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, incoming pain fibers from the peripheral receptors. So enkephalins, they bind with the opiate receptors and they produce pain inhibition. And the mechanism of pain inhibition is, it involves both the presynaptic and the postsynaptic inhibition of fast and slow pain fibers coming from the periphery. And in the previous lectures we have studied that the fast pain fibers from the receptors to the spinal cord is carried by the A delta fibers, and the slow pain sensation from the peripheral receptors to the spinal cord is carried by the type C fibers. So these enkephalins, they cause pre and post synaptic inhibition of both of the type C and type A delta fibers. Due to inhibition of these pain carrying nerve fibers, there is suppression of the pain, and it involves both the sharp or the fast pain and the slow pain. So that's how the analgesia system work to cause suppression of the pain signals, and it decreases the sensitivity to pain. Now these neurotransmitters which are involved in causing suppression of pain, they are called as opiate neurotransmitters, because these opiate neurotransmitters bind with the opiate receptors present in different parts of the brain. Now these opiate neurotransmitters include the enkephalins that we have just studied in relation with the analgesia system, and there are two types of enkephalins. We have metenkephalins and leuenkephalins. Then we have the endorphins. We have the endorphins, beta endorphins, and the third type of neurotransmitter is the dynorphins. So we have metenkephalin, leuenkephalin, endorphin, and dynorphins, which are the opiate neurotransmitters secreted within the body. Morphine is an exogenous opioid. Morphine, it is an exogenous opioid which also suppresses, when it is administered, it causes suppression of pain by binding with opiate receptors. So this is the diagram showing us the components of the analgesia system that we have just discussed, and we talked about it, that there is periventricular nuclear zone which sends signals to the periaqueductal gray matter, and from the periaqueductal gray matter signals are transmitted, fibers go to the raphe nucleus. Raphe nucleus, which is present in the lower part of the pons and in upper part of the medulla. Now you can see there is a synapse here. Now these nerve fibers which terminate onto the neurons in the raphe nucleus, these are enkephalin secreting nerve fibers. So these pink colored fibers, they secrete enkephalin as neurotransmitters when they synapse with the neurons present in the raphe nucleus. Now from here the fibers arise, that is from the raphe nucleus, and these fibers, they descend down and they terminate onto the pain inhibitory complex present in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So pain inhibitory complex in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord is basically a collection of neurons which are involved in pain suppression. When these fibers synapse here with the neurons in the pain inhibitory complex, they are going to release serotonin as their neurotransmitter. So these fibers are called as serotonergic neurons. So they secrete serotonin. Now you can see these pink colored neurons. So these are the neurons of the pain inhibitory complex. Now their fibers, that is the neurons of the pain inhibitory complex in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, their fibers synapse with the incoming pain fibers from the periphery. So these are the pain fibers which are carrying the fast and the slow pain sensation from the receptors in different parts of the skin, and they enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root, and then they enter into the dorsal gray matter. So here these fibers of the pain inhibitory complex, they cause both the presynaptic as well as the postsynaptic inhibition of these incoming pain fibers. Now in this slide we can clearly see this. This is the neuron of the dorsal this is a neuron of the pain inhibitory complex in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So this is the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, this is the ventral. So in the dorsal horn, this is the pain inhibitory neuron, and this neuron, you can see it causes presynaptic inhibition and postsynaptic inhibition of incoming pain fibers. So these are the pain fibers carrying the pain sensation from the receptors. This is the dorsal root ganglion, and due to inhibition of these incoming pain fibers by presynaptic and postsynaptic inhibition, there is decreased signal transmission through the spinothalamic tract to the brain. So there is decreased sensitivity to pain, there is suppression of the pain by the analgesia system of the nervous system itself. Now coming to the abnormalities of the pain sensation. Now different abnormalities we are going to discuss. First we are going to talk about the hyperalgesia. Now hyperalgesia is defined as increased sensitivity to pain. Hyperalgesia is increased sensitivity to pain. Then is the neuralgia. So neuralgia can be post-herpetic neuralgia, it can be trigeminal neuralgia, or it can be glossopharyngeal neuralgia. Now the question is, what neuralgia is? Neuralgia is basically an excessive, or we can say it is an excessive, or it is a stabbing or a burning or electric shock like pain which is felt in some part of the body due to irritated or damaged nerve. I am repeating that neuralgia is a very excessive, it's a very severe stabbing type of pain or burning or electric shock like pain due to irritated nerve or due to damage to the nerve, and it is usually felt in the sensory distribution of a nerve. The common type is the trigeminal and the glossopharyngeal neuralgia. In trigeminal neuralgia, there is a severe stabbing or burning or electric shock like pain in the sensory distribution of the trigeminal nerve. And in case of glossopharyngeal neuralgia, there is pain, excessive pain, severe pain sensation which is felt in the sensory distribution of the glossopharyngeal nerve. There is increased sensitivity to pain, so that the mechanoceptive stimuli on the skin or in the throat can cause a pain sensation. Mechanoceptive stimulation of the skin in case of the trigeminal neuralgia will produce pain, while in case of glossopharyngeal neuralgia, mechanoceptive stimulation in the throat, like during swallowing of the bolus of the food, this mechanical contact of the bolus of the food with the throat will cause an excessive pain sensation. So this is called as neuralgia. The third one is the post-herpetic neuralgia. Now first we are going to see what is herpes zoster. Herpes zoster is also known as shingles, and this is basically a viral infection of the dorsal root ganglion. So it causes the blisters or the vesicles to be formed in the sensory distribution of the in sensory distribution of this nerve of which it causes the blisters or the vesicles to be formed on the skin in the segment of the in the dermatome of the skin whose the segment or whose dorsal root ganglion is being affected. So this is called as herpes zoster. Herpes zoster sometimes is associated with post-herpetic neuralgia, in which after the blisters or the vesicles they disappear, but there is persistence of pain in the dermatome or in the skin which was affected. So that is called as post-herpetic neuralgia. Then the last is the headache and the pain. All of us are familiar with the headache and with the migraine as well. And headache is basically a pain referred to the surface of the head from the deeper structures. So it is a referred pain. Headache is a referred pain referred to the skin which is or the surface of the head from the deeper structures. Now there can be different causes for the headache, and the causes of the headache can be categorized as the extracranial causes and the intracranial causes. Extracranial causes are those causes arising outside the brain. They are outside the cranium, like muscle spasm can cause headache, different eye disorders, refractive errors, conjunctivitis can cause headache. Then there can be headache due to sinusitis, involvement of the paranasal sinuses. Otitis media can cause headache, and there is an eye disorder which is known as glaucoma. It can also result in headache. So these are different extracranial causes of the headache. Then intracranial causes of the headache include the meningitis, that is inflammation of the meninges, and the increased intracranial pressure. So increased intracranial pressure and meningitis is the intracranial cause of the headache. Now we move on to the migraine. Now migraine क्या है? It is basically again a pain, but it is a throbbing type of the pain which is felt in half of the head. ठीक है? So migraine is the throbbing type of pain felt in one half of the head, and it is considered as a vascular pain. And usually migraine is preceded by prodromal symptoms. प्रोड्रोमल सिम्टम्स क्या होती हैं? वो सिम्टम्स जो किसी चीज़ के अक्रेंस से पहले अपेयर होती हैं. सो इन केस ऑफ migraine, before it starts there are prodromal symptoms which indicate that an attack of migraine is going to start. So these prodromal symptoms include the nausea and different types of hallucinations. Hallucinations can be auditory hallucinations or visual hallucinations. So different types of hallucination and nausea are the prodromal symptoms of migraine. So these were the abnormalities of the pain sensations. Now we are going to move on to the next tract, which is the spinocerebellar pathway. In spinocerebellar pathway, we are going to discuss two tracts: the anterior spinocerebellar tract and the posterior spinocerebellar tract. The spinocerebellar pathway, it consists of the rapidly conducting nerve fibers. It consists of rapidly conducting nerve fibers which have a high conduction velocity. First, we are going to talk about the posterior spinocerebellar tract, and then we will study the anterior or the ventral spinocerebellar tract. Now, the posterior spinocerebellar tract, it is basically concerned with the transmission of the impulses from proprioceptors. So this is the sensation which is carried by the spinocerebellar pathway, both the anterior spinocerebellar pathway and the posterior spinocerebellar pathway. So it transmits the proprioceptive impulses which carries the signals about the muscle length, muscle tension, position and movement. It carries the sensation to these signals to the cerebellum. So it originates in the spinal cord and it ends up in the cerebellum. That's why it is called as spinocerebellar. So this was about the function of the spinocerebellar pathway. Now we move on to the actual pathway. So as is the case with the other sensory tracts, the first order neurons which carry the proprioceptive impulses from the periphery, they enter the spinal cord through the posterior roots. They enter the spinal cord through the posterior roots of the spinal cord. Now these fibers, they enter the dorsal gray horn and they synapse with the neurons in the nucleus dorsalis. In the beginning, when we talked about the physiological anatomy of the spinal cord, there we have studied different nuclear groups present in the dorsal horn. So one of the group was nucleus dorsalis. So fibers of these posterior spinocerebellar tract, the fibers carrying the signals from the periphery or from the receptors, they synapse with the neurons present in the nucleus dorsalis. Now from here the second order fibers arise and they ascend ipsilaterally in the posterolateral white column as posterior spinocerebellar pathway. They do not cross over to the opposite side. Okay? So second order fibers which arise, they enter the posterolateral white column and they ascend upward as posterior spinocerebellar tract. This tract ascends to the medulla oblongata, and where it passes through the inferior cerebellar peduncle to enter the cerebellum. Now peduncles are basically the structures which connect the cerebellum to the brain stem. So we have three peduncles: superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So posterior spinocerebellar tract, it enters the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and there these fibers are going to end up. So in cerebellum, these fibers end up in the vermis and the intermediate zone of the cerebellar hemisphere. Like cerebrum, the cerebellum also consists of two halves, and each half is called a hemisphere. So there are two cerebellar hemispheres, and the fibers of the posterior spinocerebellar tract, they end up in the ipsilateral ipsilateral part of the cerebellum. And we have talked already that these carries the impulses of proprioception. Now coming to the ventral spinocerebellar tract. The ventral spinocerebellar tract, also known as anterior spinocerebellar tract or the anterior spinocerebellar pathway. Again, the fibers of the first order neurons enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root, and they synapse with the neurons in the nucleus dorsalis. So this is the same for both the posterior spinocerebellar tract and the anterior spinocerebellar tract. The fibers are going to synapse with the neurons present in the nucleus dorsalis. Now from here the second order fibers arise, and these fibers cross over to the opposite side. Remember that posterior spinocerebellar pathway is uncrossed pathway, while ventral spinocerebellar tract, second order fibers which arise from the nucleus dorsalis, they cross over to the opposite side and they ascend upward in the anterolateral white column of the opposite side as ventral spinocerebellar tract. Now this tract ascends upward to the midbrain, and in the midbrain it passes through the superior cerebellar peduncle to enter the cerebellum. So midbrain is connected to the cerebellum through the superior cerebellar peduncle, and through the fibers of the ventral spinocerebellar tract pass through the superior cerebellar peduncle and enter the cerebellum. Now in the cerebellum these fibers are going to terminate, but before termination the fibers again cross over to before termination these fibers again cross over to the opposite side, and after crossing over to the opposite side this tract is going to end up in the vermis and the intermediate zone of the cerebellum. So the crossing over occurs two times in the in case of the ventral spinocerebellar pathway. So because of the crossing over which occurs two times, ultimately the signals they are transmitted onto the ipsilateral side, onto the ipsilateral half of the cerebellum. So ultimately the fibers of the tract end up in the cerebellar cortex on the same side, and it is carrying the proprioceptive impulses to the cerebellum. And remember that cerebellum, it receives information from the ipsilateral part of the body. So the posterior spinocerebellar tract is uncrossed and end up on the ipsilateral side, while ventral spinocerebellar pathway, it crosses over two times. So ultimately this tract also ends up in the ipsilateral part of the cerebellum. So cerebellum is concerned basically with the control of the equilibrium, and it is concerned with the control of the movements and the posture. That's why it is important to transmit. It is important that the proprioceptive impulses are relayed to the cerebellum, so and the proprioceptive impulses are transmitted through these anterior and the posterior spinocerebellar pathways. So here is a diagram showing us the two pathways, the spinocerebellar pathways. We have the anterior and the posterior spinocerebellar tract, and this is the posterior spinocerebellar tract. This is the fibers carrying the signals from the periphery, and these are carrying proprioceptive inputs. They are going to terminate in the neurons in the nucleus dorsalis. In case of the posterior spinocerebellar tract, this is going to ascend upward as ipsilateral tract, while in case of the anterior spinocerebellar tract, the second order fibers, they cross over to the opposite side and ascend upward as anterior spinocerebellar tract. Posterior spinocerebellar tract, it enters the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, which connects the medulla to the cerebellum. While in case of the anterior spinocerebellar tract, it enters the cerebellum through the superior cerebellar peduncle, and when it terminates, before it termination, it again cross over to the opposite side. So due to crossing of the fibers to the opposite side, ultimately it is going to end up in the ipsilateral part of the cerebellum, and cerebellum, each half of the cerebellum, it receives proprioceptive inputs from the same side of the body. So that was about the spinocerebellar pathways, and that's all for today's lecture as well. I hope you understand the lecture, and if you have any question, you can ask me. You're free to ask your queries. Thank you for the listening.